John Wayne Airport, Santa Ana, California, headed to Terminal 2 to take off on a flight to St. Paul, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and ultimately to Superior, Wisconsin to go see our friends at AMSOIL.
Flight 209er, clear for Vector 324.
We have clearance, Clarence.
Roger, Roger. What's our vector, Victor?
Holman, welcome to Minneapolis, St. Paul.
I've been here many times.
Yeah, you passed through this joint quite a few over the years.
Say at least 100. Yeah.
I've only been here twice, both times for AMSOIL.
This is the only place in 25 years of flying that I've ever gotten stuck overnight.
Happy to say that has not happened to me. Have you been to AMSOIL Arena?
No, and I have never been to AMSOIL proper, so I'm actually really looking forward to this trip. I'll be honest with you, when we signed AMSOIL, we both use their stuff anyway, but when we signed them on the Truck Show podcast, by the way, the sushi joint here,
yeah,
it seems like a sushi in the airport wouldn't be great.
But it's really good?
It's really good, and if you think about it, all the fish is fresh because it doesn't have to leave the airport, right? There's no ocean nearby.
Oh, yeah, I didn't think about that.
Anyway, so this place is really good. Going back to AMSOIL, one of the things I was excited about was taking a tour of their facility because I've never been out this way. So, also, we need to eat cheese curds.
Cheese curds. Can we hit a, what's the local spot here? Culver's?
Yes, Culver's.
Yes. Because they butter their buns.
So I have no idea what we're going to do for a rental car here. Hopefully it'll be something not crappy. We'll see.
Can we get an SUV? Small SUV? Large SUV? Don't care. SUV.
I think we have President's Circle, so we get to choose.
I'm going to go on this escalator and you go on that one. I'm going to hold the phone, record you across the way here.
So we're going down two different escalators at the same time.
We're stereoscopic.
It's very romantic.
Oh, we're getting on a tram. Oh, doors are closing.
Please stand clear of the doors. Please exit for car rental, blue, red, and silver parking, shuttles, buses, light rail, Terminal 2, and off-airport locations.
I feel like we got ripped off. We went like 8 feet.
Yep.
It was, what? It wasn't a tram ride. I could have crawled this far. All right, here we go. Rolling up to the gold member directory. And we're looking for Holman S. President's Circle. Look at that. What does it mean, President's Circle? That just means you get the pick of the litter?
Yeah, basically, see where it says President's Circle?
Oh, yeah.
You can choose anything on that.
Okay, well, let's pretend that we're in Southern California, get a convertible Mustang.
No.
I'm kidding. We have Volvos, Buicks. I'm not impressed so far.
Nope.
We got a lot of Hyundais.
Got a Ram classic pickup truck down there.
Maybe.
Remember you hate those because they're boring?
Yeah, but I would take that over anything so far. Oh, we got a Nissan. What's this, a Rogue? What is this? Murano. I'm concerned about the truck. It's going to be a total stripper model. I'm not feeling this truck. Oh, it's actually clean. I'm okay with it. It's kind of beat. It's your call. You're driving. All right, well, we settled for the Tiguan, the Volkswagen Tiguan with a whopping 2,000 miles on the odometer. All right, pulling away from Hertz. Poor selection of rental cars there, unfortunately. And headed out to Superior, Wisconsin to go visit our friends at AMSOIL. And before we do that, we got to thank a few of our friends, including Nissan.
Well, you guys know it. The Truck Show podcast is presented by Nissan. So if you're in the market for a midsize truck, check out the Nissan Frontier, or a full-size SUV, you want to check out the upcoming Nissan Armada. It is awesome. You can head on over to nissanusa.com to build and price or to find out more information. And, of course, you can head on down to your local dealer and get yourself behind the wheel for a test drive. And I hope it goes a lot better than this rental.
And when you're not on a bridge heading over a lake, you're at bankspower.com shopping for your Duramax parts, including the brand new Cool Runner oil pan. And you can check out the brand new Ram Air trans pans. Everyone hates high trans temps, so get rid of those high trans temps and get yourself a Ram Air trans pan from Banks. You'll find them right now for 01 to 2019 Allison 1000 5 and 6-speed transmissions, and coming soon for the 10-speed transmissions. You'll find those brand new lubrication parts with AMSOIL products over at bankspower.com.
Did you say AMSOIL?
That's right.
All right, well, we are actually heading to AMSOIL. As you guys know, this is going to be a great episode, and we have to thank them for allowing us to infiltrate their facility and learn all about how the AMSOIL is made. We won't tell you too much. You get to listen to the show and find out all about AMSOIL, but if you just can't wait, go to AMSOIL.com, where you can find all the different products they have for your vehicle. It's not just oil, it's a whole line of synthetic lubricants and car care products. We love our friends over at AMSOIL. They were the first in synthetics.
And last but not least, EGR. Our friends at EGRUSA.com have some of the very finest truck accessories, including my favorite, the Roll Track, which is electric or manual. It's the retractable bed cover for almost all of the popular full-size pickup trucks. Head over to EGRUSA.com to buy yours.
The Truck Show. We're gonna show you what we know. We're gonna answer what the truck, 'cause truck rhymes with the Truck Show. We have the lifted, we have the lowered, and everything in between. We'll talk about trucks that run on diesel and the ones that run on gasoline. The Truck Show, the Truck Show, the Truck Show. Oh, oh.
It's the Truck Show with your hosts, Lightning and Holman.
All right, so Holman, if you look off to your left-hand side here, as we just enter across the bridge from Duluth to Superior, Wisconsin.
Hold on, trying to merge. There's Super Duty on the fifth wheel towing a boat.
Whoa.
Hey.
Wait a
We
minute.
don't see those where we come from.
That's a Super Duty with a fifth wheel and then a boat attached to the back of the fifth wheel.
Why do people merge over here?
They don't. All right, walking into AMSOIL. Oh, it's a beautiful lobby, and we are greeted with, oh, Holly. Wait, Holly, what are these orange vests that we do?
We don't safety vest, Lightning, and they match your eyes.
We do not have to wear these, do we really?
Yeah, safety first.
You know, it's funny, at the Truck Show podcast, we always subscribe to safety third, so it's going to be a little bit different for us on this trip.
Do you have an extra medium?
No.
No, okay. Don't walk away from me, guys. We're about to start the tour. All right, so Holman is going to repeat. So Holly didn't want to be on mic, and we have to go through a safety briefing.
She didn't want the proprietary safety video to be recorded because, their competitors would know how safe they are here. So I'll break it down for you, Lightning.
Sure, please.
It's very simple.
Yes.
Don't touch anything.
Okay.
Don't touch anything.
Yeah.
Don't touch anything.
Okay.
Also, there'll be some lines on the floor. Stay between the lines.
Okay.
Better than you do, like when you're coloring, you don't go out. It's not a fashion statement. It's not like new art if you're outside.
So they're not suggestions. It's mandatory.
It's mandatory.
All right.
Also, wear your eye protection.
Yes.
And don't scream, yell fire, or steal anything.
Okay.
No mementos from AMSOIL. You can't have them. Do you have your closed-toed shoes on?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Hey, Holly, do you have one of those monkey backpacks that have the tail on it? Because if you want to put one of those, a safety backpack with a leash, I'll clip them to my belt loop.
Like the Disneyland ones?
Yes. I'll just clip them to my belt loop.
It keeps me from wandering off.
That's a full-time job.
It is.
You were smart by adding the orange vests.
Yes, that's why we can keep an eye on you, and our visitors have orange and employees have yellow.
Oh, that's
You can stick out more, so.
Oh, we're entering the floor, and we're following the yellow brick road. We're inside AMSOIL. All right, we're going to start off our AMSOIL tour in the historical section, kind of the Wall of Fame, and we've got Darren. What's up, Darren? How you doing?
Doing great. How are you guys doing?
Fantastic. Tell us where
what's
we
your job
are
here?
I'm vice president of manufacturing, so I'm responsible.
That's pretty important.
It is at times.
Wait a minute. How did you get lumped
With
into
us? Why
touring
is
us?
why is a VP?
Don't you have a better job to do right now?
Nope, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be.
All right.
I'm responsible for manufacturing and maintenance at all of the AMSOIL locations. So we've got the building that we're in, which is the manufacturing area, obviously your manufacturing plant. There are multiple buildings here in Superior, Wisconsin, but then we also have another manufacturing site down in Milwaukee where we specialize in industrial lubricants.
Okay.
So stuff that your average, your truck enthusiast is not going to be interested in, but it's
unless they're in manufacturing or.
I will say that, Darren. So I work at Banks Power out in Los Angeles, and we just got a pallet full of industrial lubricants for a lot of our larger tools, CNC machines, things like that.
Yeah, and that For truck enthusiasts, that would be more on the front end of it. It's like, hey, where is my truck made? How do they make it?
Yeah.
These fluids would be used in that application. So stamping of parts, machining of parts, things like that. That's what the Milwaukee location specializes in.
And then you do have a facility out in Las Vegas. Is that just warehousing?
Correct. That's our Las Vegas distribution center. AMSOIL has 12 distribution centers. There are 10 in the United States, 2 in Canada, and they're dispersed in such a fashion that for an average customer, if you were to order today, you will get your product tomorrow. Again, the dispersion just really gives us the ability to service the whole country in ideally 1, worst case 2 days. But then AMSOIL is also sold in, I think the number is up to 84 countries now, so it's a global corporation as well.
Congrats. Well, let's go find out about the history. I want to get to the roots of Al's story here.
So this is just kind of generically known as the AMSOIL Museum, and as you stated, there's a lot of historical documentation pictures off to the side here, and really it kind of goes in chronological order as you walk down. So there's a great poster over there that talks about the history of Al Amatuzio, how he was inspired by his time as a fighter pilot to begin researching synthetic lubricants for, quite frankly, a civilian application. And his efforts where he wasn't necessarily the chemist behind it, but he knew people to get in touch with and really was the one that organized all of that so that AMSOIL could become the first manufacturer of an authorized synthetic lubricant.
This would have been about what year range when he was starting the company?
Year range was 1963 was when he really started doing the research and trying to establish, all right, what would it take to kind of move this from a military application to a civilian application. By 1966, he had his first formula that was being sold commercially, and then he was actually given authorization through API. So they said, hey, we deem this the first true synthetic lubricant in 1971.
That was groundbreaking.
It was. Prior,
and not being part of a massive oil corporation or anything either, too, right? I mean, that's a big deal.
And that's really a cornerstone of the AMSOIL philosophy, so to speak, is that, it's kind of us against the world. We're not, the other major oil manufacturers that you see on, your Walmart shelf or whatever like that. So it's always been this bit of a David and Goliath story. AMSOIL, because we are the best lubricants that you can buy, we've always kind of had a niche within that market. And then also because we really service the enthusiast market and do a lot of specialization that the other majors just don't do, has really been where we've been able to carve out our existence and really grow significantly in the time since 1971 and the API authorization.
How long have you worked here?
I've been here for just under 2 years. It'll be 2 years at the end of October.
What did you do before this?
I worked in food manufacturing.
So you know how to run a plant?
That's all I've done. All I've done is operations. Company I worked for was Harman International, so it's the parent company for like Harman Kardon stereos. So,
Man after my own heart right here. I'm a car stereo geek. I love all the Harman brands.
The one I worked for was actually Crown.
Some of the best amplifiers in the, if you go to a concert, those are all Crown amps.
Yes, they are. Actually, local to us, the Minnesota Vikings football stadium, my plant manufactured the 180 amplifiers that they use to power their sound system there. When I started with that company, 11 out of the 13 World Cup arenas were powered with Crown amplifiers.
Okay.
So what was it like coming over to a brand like AMSOIL that had this kind of, you said David and Goliath, but it's this history that's almost a little bit gritty when you compare it to we like to say that we're scrappy, but I feel like this company was founded a little bit on scrappiness and innovation and not having the massive resources of a big company at your disposal, and it grew into what it is today.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. Scrappy is a great way to describe it. The current owner and CEO, Alan Amatuzio, he is very good when he gives presentations to the company, our dealer network, where the passion that he has for AMSOIL and that scrappy attitude comes through, and it's palpable. You can feel it. And that was instilled in him, from his dad, and he's worked for AMSOIL, the corporation, now for 36 years, I believe. So really his whole adult life has really revolved around working for AMSOIL. But as a kid, it was working in Al's garage and helping to manufacture stuff that he was then selling.
The logo for AMSOIL, which is really iconic, but it has an S. You'll see the old logo has a Z. And now there's actually a really interesting story behind why Amatuzio, AMS with a Z oil, today is AMS with an S oil.
Kind of going back to that scrappy attitude when it was originally with the Z. That's more true, like you said, to the Amatuzio spelling. But Pennzoil is also with a Z, and being the company that Pennzoil is, they had an issue with us using a Z. So the easy solution was change the Z to an S, and that's where you're at with the modern logo for AMSOIL.
And there you are.
I bet you guys didn't know that.
No, it's an interesting story, but again, that goes to the kind of David and Goliath nature of it. Pennzoil saw AMSOIL as being somebody that they could just crush, and they're like, all right, we're going to go at them. And
you're still here today.
Yeah, it didn't work.
I wonder if you're like the old-timer Pennzoil guy. You're like, I can't believe they're still around. I couldn't get rid of them with a Z, and now they're still doing it. What a thorn in my side.
Is that what an old-timey oil executive sounds like?
Yeah, I think so.
Just checking. All right, so
walk through the Wall of Fame here, and as you can imagine, there's all types of trophies and badges and
motorsports from back in the day. I mean, you've got looks like Mazda RX-7 up there in the corner. You've got monster trucks. You've got dirt track racers. You even have what is probably one of the original semi trucks owned by the company for delivering loads and things like that.
Yes, it is. And actually, the black and white picture you see down there, that's Al with the first delivery truck that AMSOIL had, which is known as...
And it's a Mack, too.
It's known as Big Red, and we still have Big Red. It's in one of the garages over by our headquarters building.
That's awesome.
Our maintenance crew still maintains it as a roadworthy licensed semi-truck. It doesn't ever go anywhere, but it certainly could. It's capable of doing that, but yeah, that's a very historical piece that is near and dear to Alan's heart, just from seeing his dad, personally driving it and making deliveries.
So, Holly, next time we come out, can we schedule a ride-along in Big Red?
Absolutely.
Yeah, but like I said, it is a roadworthy vehicle.
So I noticed over here on the wall you've got some racers, and one of them is Bobby Unser. My understanding is there's a story behind him possibly being sponsored by another company, but maybe running AMSOIL.
So Bobby Unser was a good friend of Al Amatuzio, and he typically ran AMSOIL in his vehicle regardless of who his named sponsor was.
That's so funny, cool, and dirty all at the same time.
He did a practice that was known as brown bagging, and it was literally a brown bag would go in, and it was what he wanted to run versus what the name on his car said.
The big sponsor probably didn't care as long as he won, right?
Well, they probably cared.
Yeah, maybe they cared. Who knows?
I'm sure they'd be a little upset by it, but yeah, I mean, if they got their name on the winning car, that's fine. But at the end of the day, I think it's pretty cool that he was actually winning with AMSOIL versus that sponsor.
Yeah.
That story lives in legend today within the halls of AMSOIL.
And I think there's some video on YouTube with him talking about it as well. So go find that.
That is awesome. And then when you've got boat racing, Pacific Offshore Powerboat Racing Association Super Cat Light record, world speed record holder running AMSOIL 131.981, which on the water is that's a lot.
Yeah, on the water that's scary fast.
Yeah.
I mean, 40 on the water is fast. I couldn't imagine 131.
Yeah, no.
So what was the original focus when Al launched this back in the day? Was it automotive? Was it motorcycles? Because you have everything on this wall. He's touched anything with an internal combustion engine, he's made a lubricant for.
Yes, that is accurate. And I would say that his initial offerings were, for passenger car motor oil. So, for Joe Blow driving, his grocery getter, daily driver, that was where it started. I think what happened was he quickly branched out and really identified the niche that AMSOIL could provide for. And that was where we started down the road of specialization and really serving the enthusiast market because of the quality of what we had. This was something where he quickly identified that under the conditions of racing and other really harsh conditions, AMSOIL thrives in that environment. So it allowed him to kind of, again, take his entrepreneurial mind and say, all right, how can I expand this beyond just being a little guy fighting a big uphill battle in passenger car motor oil where it was really dominated by the majors.
Yeah, it's basically a commodity at that point, right?
Exactly. It's exactly what it was. So he branched out and said, all right, well, I'm going to start serving the enthusiast market. And through that, it became more word of mouth. And then also, one of the pictures we walked by over here.
He was dealing with the early influencers before there was an Instagram and Facebook and TikTok.
Without a doubt, yeah. This goes back to the old school word of mouth. Like you're saying, nowadays it's all social media. Back then it was, hey, I'm using this stuff. It's done great in my car. I don't have to change my oil as frequently. All the different types of testimonials that you would get from people that use it were what drove the sales. And that picture there, that's from one of our very early dealer conventions in its infancy, that's really what drove the growth of AMSOIL.
It's great. Awesome. And when you have so many of these, you've got like ambassadors now, thousands of brand ambassadors that are passionate about the brand.
Well, and the product is good. Like there's a lot of things where the product isn't good, right? Like there's a lot of marketing and whatever. The product is amazing.
Yeah, and again, going back to what I'd said before about the word of mouth, these aren't necessarily paid spokespeople. You know, AMSOIL, and especially initially, the word got out because people were just talking, hey, this is great. You know, I changed my oil half as much, or, you know, a third as much, whatever the case may be. I'm saving money by doing it. Oh, wow, that sounds great. Where can I get it? And it was that goodwill established by high product quality that really enabled AMSOIL to grow.
Awesome. Said. All right.
Continue down the wall here.
So now we're getting into like Bryce Menzies, who's got a Red Bull Toyota Tires trophy truck, and into the off-road scene. I see snowmobiles.
Yeah, as you get more into this stuff, this is where AMSOIL really got more into the sponsorship and race support. So Bryce Menzies, as you mentioned, he's a huge supporter of AMSOIL. Last year in July, we had our 50th anniversary convention for the dealer network. Bryce Menzies was here with his truck. So we've got a lot of support from those people as brand ambassadors out in their respective, race fields, but then also coming back here and supporting AMSOIL locally for the dealer network and other events like that. What you see on the left-hand side here, or I'm sorry, the right-hand side, I'm getting myself backwards. These are all the products that AMSOIL currently makes, and these are really divided up kind of by families. So this first group that you see here, I just generically call this toys. So this is motorcycles, dirt bikes, ATV, UTV, snowmobile, marine lubricant there. So these are all the products that we currently manufacture to support kind of that toy market. And again, when I say toy, I'm not trying to be offensive. This is really the enthusiast market where people get into this stuff and really are buying this for a very specific purpose.
I like the two-stroke oil. One oil covers all the mix ratios.
Yes.
Like that's a pretty big deal.
It is. I've got, multiple two-stroke tools at home, and having Sabre like that is fantastic because, again, doesn't matter the mix ratio. It is a good enough lubricant that even if it requires like a 100-to-1 mix, you mix it at 50-to-1, you'll be fine. So the Sabre is fantastic. We got it in some of these little pouches here where it's just a one and done. 1 gallon pouch, finished. Makes it really, really simple, very clean to mix that. In the past, I've been out there, using other brands with like a measuring cup or something like that.
I've done that too.
Yeah.
Pain in the butt.
This takes all that out of the equation.
Then we move on to the next family over here.
So everything that you see in front of us, this is going to support passenger cars. So, and when I say passenger cars, I mean that generically, also trucks, anything that is a common use, I'd say daily driver type vehicle, that's what you're going to find here. We've also got different flushes and engine additives that'll clean out filters, things like that. This includes some of our new brands or new SKUs that we've launched recently. So the high mileage motor oil that you see here, and then also we launched a hybrid motor oil that is specifically for the modern hybrid vehicle. Those are becoming a huge thing. They're every manufacturer makes them now. Regular oil works just fine, but this was actually formulated for the kind of start and stop nature that comes with a hybrid motor.
And also a hybrid, a lot of times the engine's not even warmed up.
Yeah.
It just goes, cold morning start, maybe it warms up a little bit, but like in California where it's 60, 70 degrees, a lot of times in the hybrid we own, we drive on electric and the engine doesn't even stop until you get on it. And I always worry about turbocharged engine lighting up cold to give you that extra power you need to merge on the freeway or something like that. So that was one of those curiosities is I wonder what kind of protection that engine needs.
And that's what it is. Again, it's designed specifically for, more of that start-stop nature that comes with a hybrid vehicle. If you're commuting locally, your motor may not even really turn on.
Yeah.
You go for a longer trip, it's going to fire up to recharge the battery. So that's where you do get that kind of protection.
In that startup phase is when you do the most wear, right? That's what I've heard. Is that true? That like that initial startup is like, it's because you've got bearing on bearing contact potentially for a few moments.
That is true. From what I've been told, learning working here is that the startup phase is by far the worst. Where we live up here in northern Minnesota or northern Wisconsin, northern Minnesota, in the wintertime it's negative 25 degrees, and at that point your oil is thicker and you have less coverage in your motor. It tends to drain out. Your motor's warm, everything kind of drains down into the oil pan. You have less protection for those wear parts. And that's really where you get one of the biggest benefits for a synthetic lubricant is that it doesn't have the same type of reaction to cold or hot weather that other oils do. So in cold weather, it still flows well. in very hot temperatures. It doesn't get too thin where you're getting less protection. So AMSOIL is something that really runs the gamut from one extreme to the other. And in the middle range, hey, it works great there too, because now you're getting, truly the best of both worlds. But if you're running in any kind of an extreme environment, you're going to be covered using AMSOIL.
So what is the difference between the different colored caps and a black bottle and a silver bottle?
The silver bottle denotes what I would say are a more pedestrian offering.
Mainstream?
Yeah, more mainstream. The black bottle is going to be for our signature series, which is the AMSOIL top of the line. That's something where it's guaranteed protection for 25,000 miles between oil changes. Even our next level down, our XL line, that's going to be guaranteed for 15,000 miles. So again, very long extended duration. The cap color historically was more family based. But that is something that as AMSOIL has expanded and offered a lot more products, the cap color has become less of a focal point.
You ran out of colors, didn't you? You weren't going to do pink.
There is a point, yeah, where quite frankly you do run out of colors.
Salmon, sorry.
This is a project that was recently brought up, and it's something that I think we will probably pursue, where we go with a more standardized cap color. Again, looking across the market, this is not something that drives consumer behavior at all. They're reading the label, they're looking at that type of stuff. They're not going and saying, hey, I need the one with the green cap.
Yeah.
And the reality is there are multiple different versions with a green cap, so that's not really going to provide you with a lot of information. So yeah, that was recognized where we can cut down on the different colors of caps we need to carry. It gives us greater buying power for a smaller group of cap colors. We don't have to store as many in the building, but at the end of the day, it's not something that's going to directly affect a customer either.
So we talk about this all the time on the show, and that's the fact that AMSOIL makes more than just motor oil. And so sitting here on the shelf, we've got flushes, we've got brake fluid, we've got gasoline stabilizer,
octane boost,
steering fluid, octane boost, and then to the left you've got the new interior products that we've been playing around with recently. And on the other side of the table, you've got the filters. So, I mean, you guys just released oil filter kits where you can get nitrile gloves, the sticker, a funnel, and the oil of your choice for your application along with the correct filter in one bundle directly from AMSOIL in one kit. You guys really are the one-stop shop for somebody who wants to do maintenance on their vehicle.
Yeah, and again, that's where AMSOIL really caters to that DIY market, where you've got people that they're not a mechanic, but they do what they can to take care of their vehicle, and we want to make that as easy and seamless as possible. So to your point about the kits, we want to be, and the term that we use is the best online oil change. And that's, again, you get the sticker you put in your window to write your mileage on, so as you get that reminder. You get a pair of gloves to keep your hands clean. You get a fast funnel so that you can actually do a nice clean job when you're changing out your oil. The filter for your car, and you're going to get within reason, exactly the amount of oil that you need for your engine. So you go into our lookup guide. The lookup guide that we have is extensive, covers not only, vehicles and trucks, but it covers motorcycles, boats, all that kind of stuff. So whatever oil change you're doing, you go on there and it's going to tell you, hey, this is what you need, this is how much you need. Yeah. And we're working to build that out into more and more kits so that we can support that DIY market and not have people having to run out to a hardware store or something like that to buy the little things that they need that you may not think about.
Well, we were joking that the sticker, because the oil change intervals are so long, if you use a Sharpie to mark your date, it'll just fade. And so that's when you know when to do your oil change. When the marker fades and you can no longer read what mileage, then you're probably due.
That's actually a good point, yeah. And since I've started with AMSOIL, even speaking with my family and friends, I feel like I've become a brand ambassador myself, where it's like, hey guys, this is going to protect your car for 25,000 miles. I recently visited my father-in-law in Colorado. He has a UTV. He's due for an oil change, so I brought up the website and put in his stuff. I was like, hey, here you go. You're good to go with everything you need right here. So again, having that best online oil change experience is really good for people to do.
We're thinking in terms of cars, trucks, passenger vehicles. So if you've got property and you've got a side-by-side or UTV up there that only works when you're up there, maybe you go up there every month or 6 weeks, you can put AMSOIL in it and not have to worry about constant maintenance on it because it's going to last you a long time. So those extended oil change intervals aren't just for cars. You can use it for equipment as well.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. Again, the extended oil change intervals are something that are just inherent to the products that we produce. Cars, because, especially a daily driver type vehicle, people rack up the mileage a lot faster. I've read recently that, the average commute for people is longer than it ever has been. So you're putting the mileage on faster. So with the passenger car motor oil, that's always been the focus. But yeah, you're exactly right, that same principle applies to the different, vehicles, toys, whatever it is that you have. Yeah, and your point about a wrench, that's not a toy, that's a working vehicle that you need to get the work done, and it still has.
And
that
nobody's
same
thinking
protection.
about maintenance if they have a part-time property that they're going and use. They just want their,
want it
Honda
to work.
Pioneer or their John Deere or whatever to fire up and do whatever they need to do around. They're going to park it and then go home. For me, I'm thinking that's nice. I don't have to worry about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that's really what we're trying to give people for that application, is that kind of peace of mind. You don't have to worry, gee, is this going to start today? Or, man, last time I started up, it sounded really rough. And it's because I hadn't run it for a month and everything was in the oil pan. With a synthetic lubricant, you get that startup protection and you don't have to worry about that type of thing.
That's huge.
Where are you personally, Darren, in the mix of product development? Because ultimately, you're the guy that has to figure out how to package it and ship it to the customer as the VP of production.
I've really pushed to get more a seat at the table because of that reason. In prior roles, I've worked for companies that had a really robust process where there was a DFM, designed for manufacture. And that's something that I'm really trying to push since I've joined AMSOIL, is the idea that, to your point, that, you can make a lot of different things, but the question is, can we make it? Should we make it? And the market's got to support it. There are lots of sub-genres or niches out there, even below the products that we currently make. And yes, we could probably go down 2-3 more levels in those niches, but there's a point where I can't manufacture it in a fashion that makes sense. So that's where I'm trying to be that advocate for manufacturing.
If you wouldn't make necessarily oil for radio-controlled airplanes.
And that's exactly right. And that's a good example. Yeah, there's a market out there for it. Probably not a particularly large market. And at the end of the day, we are a company that's looking to make money. That's what all companies do. A market like that, we would be doing that purely out of goodwill, more so than actually saying, all right, does this make sense for the business?
Although you guys have gun oil that I really like.
We do.
I use it on.
By the way, that's a big
stuff.
market. So
in fact, here it is: firearm cleaner and firearm lubricant. So I use those on my 1911s and my staccatos, and
nice. Yeah,
it's good stuff.
We've got a whole group here of aerosol products. We don't manufacture the aerosol products here in-house. It's our formulation. We have somebody else do it. It's
a science unto itself.
Well, and there is inherently some danger with manufacturing aerosol products. So that's one of those things where AMSOIL just said, you know what, that's not our core competency. We'll let the people that do it, make it for us to these specifications so it meets AMSOIL requirements. It's just somebody else does it. Other than that, everything else that we've walked through here is manufactured in this building. The only other thing I will say that we haven't manufactured is grease, which you'll see right there. Again, those are all AMSOIL formulations. But AMSOIL also just recently bought a grease company. So we acquired Aerospace Lubricants in Columbus, Ohio. They are a specialized maker of greases, and the whole intent is we want to start making our own grease. Grease is a thing that is required in basically everything. With moving parts. Yeah. We were talking earlier about hybrid vehicles and how they're becoming a lot more popular. Same thing with EVs. So fully electric vehicles, and AMSOIL sees EVs as, eventually being almost a systemic threat.
Sure.
All right, let's get into grease because those vehicles need grease too. Yeah. So it's an opportunity for us to kind of control our own destiny and bring that manufacturing in-house while also, really kind of protecting ourselves against the shifting market in the future.
Love the diesel table here. It's amazing, all the different stuff, whether it's injector clean and cetane boost, or it's oils, performance oils, racing oils.
Cold flow. I've not seen that before. Anti-gel.
Yeah, that's a product that, in California.
That's needed up here.
Yeah, up here, that is definitely needed.
Probably why I haven't seen it in California.
Yeah, you guys won't need it out there. You should be just fine. Up here in northern Wisconsin, that is definitely a requirement. But yeah, everything that you see here, again, supporting all different types of diesels, this is all manufactured in-house. So even down, like, you were looking at some of these additives and things like that, that's all made right here.
And the final section over here seems to be transmission related.
Yeah, this is going to be your gear lubricants. So, ATF fluid, different types of transmission fluid. Also, we also manufacture these soft pouches.
We love those for differential gear oil.
You have no idea.
I was
so
gonna,
good.
I was going to say that is something that really caters to that DIY differential market. I've done the diffs in my four-wheel drive, and I've used those, and it's fantastic to get to that little fill hole. It used to be that we would manufacture that oil here, and then send it out to be packaged. But we just recently, when I say recently, within the last 2 months, bought a production line so we can now actually package the pouches in-house as well.
It's amazing.
So bringing that in-house and really kind of shrinking the supply chain that we have to worry about.
If you guys are not familiar with the Easy Pack, go to AMSOIL.com and look at that, because you can't believe it's giant toothpaste basically, and you just squeeze the oil into your differential housing through the top fill port, and it's just so much easier.
And then you guys even make a coolant booster, which can lower temps by pouring it into your cooling system on your car.
Yep.
And a lot of people are worried because a lot of new vehicles run at a 220, 230 temperature, and that's because of emissions. So there's a lot of people who maybe haven't bought a car in 15 years, and they get into a new truck, and they go, why is this thing running at 220, 230, 232? There's something wrong with it. And you're like, yeah, no, that is something where the vehicle is designed for emission standpoint, but you can help the cooling system out, or especially on something like maybe, I don't know, a Jeep Wrangler 392 with a giant engine in a small space.
Not that he would know, because how would he know?
To help out your coolant temps and make you feel a little bit better about lowering those temps inside the engine bay.
Yeah, and especially if you live in a state that is known for warmer weather, where, not only do they typically run hotter, but now your car is really going to be fighting to keep it even down to that 220, 230. Something like that is a huge benefit, So if you're in your Arizona, New Mexico, places like that, Death Valley, that's going to be something you probably want in your car.
All right, so this is the first part of the tour at AMSOIL. What's part two? Do we go to the mysterious rail yard? Is that what it's called? The spur or something you guys have?
Yes, the rail spur is where we receive the vast majority of our raw materials. So really cool thing to see. This is one of those points on a tour where a lot of people say, wow, just given the space that's involved. It's an indoor area where we can have up to 6 full-sized rail car tankers in there and 4 tanker trucks all at one time.
Can we level set this next part of the tour and just let Lighty know that he cannot ride on a train today?
Boo. Come on. All you had to say is train and I'm in.
I know. That's why I'm trying to make sure you're not disappointed.
The cars are not moving, so that's the good thing. We actually have a really good setup with the local rail yard. They come in at night and swap out empty cars for full cars. So when we come in the morning, we've got a full set ready to go.
All right, everybody, stop talking. Let's walk. Here we go. Oh, my gosh. This is freaking awesome.
So this is the first time I've ever seen a rail spur indoors.
Being on the shores of Lake Superior, this is really required. The weather, the wind coming off the lake can get really nasty, and having operators trying to climb up on top of rail cars in those conditions is really, really dangerous. So this is fully enclosed. We can have 6 rail cars in here, 6 tanker cars, as well as 4 semi-truck trailers in here at one time. I will throw it out there, this is not heated though. So in the wintertime, when it's negative 25 outside, it's negative 25 in here. But at least you're out of the wind and the elements. So it really kind of makes it tolerable, I guess. Although in the summertime, like a day like today, doors are open. It's beautiful.
You got a beautiful breeze coming through. We lucked out.
Yeah, today is beautiful. So people in the summertime want to work out here, and in the wintertime they don't.
So then how do you get this base oil that's coming in on these rail cars? And these things have to be, is that 60, 70 feet long, something like that?
Yeah, that's about right. Each one holds between 30 to 33,000 gallons.
Wow. So being like it's ice on the roof and the whole place is freezing, how do you get it out of the car? It doesn't want to move. The viscosity is really thick.
What we wind up doing is the rail company will bring these in at night, drop them off, so they take away the empty ones, bring in the full ones. We will then hook them up first thing in the morning to steam from our boiler. And we each one of these tanks or rail cars is jacketed, so there's a skin around the interior tank and there's a space in there. We fill that with steam from our boiler to heat the material up. We try to get it up to 115, 120 degrees, and then it's something that's actually pumpable into the building. Otherwise, it's like trying to pump molasses.
How many are coming in per week? Like, what kind of quantities are you going through?
Last time I checked, we go through anywhere between 400 to about 450 rail cars a year.
Holy mackerel.
And right now we've got 3 in here, and if you look off to the left, this is where tanker trucks can drive in as well?
Yes.
And this is all delivery in here?
It's delivery, and we can also fill tanker trucks up and send out full tanker loads.
Wow.
Given our customer base, we don't do that a lot. We do probably 4 or 5 tankers per month. Our Milwaukee location, like we were discussing earlier with their industrial lubricants, they have 2 semi-trucks that they use for deliveries, and then they also have another bulk truck that's subdivided into compartments. So they do that a lot more where they're making mass deliveries. For us, because we're selling more, again, enthusiasts, passenger car motor oil, things like that, people aren't buying tanker loads full of that.
Right, it's going out in cardboard boxes full of 12 quarts at a time, things like that.
Yes, correct. So we do have the capability. So earlier this morning when I was out here, there was a truck in here. It was being loaded into, but again, that's about 4 to 5 a month.
The scale of this building is wild. Like, let's walk over can we walk over to the tanker?
Yeah, okay.
I've never been this close to an actual tanker. Like, it's just freaking massive.
Yeah, the tankers are huge. I mean, they're definitely 2 stories tall. We have safety lines, so you can see one up there where the operators, when they climb up, they actually tie off to those. This is certainly a huge risk as a fall hazard, especially like you said, the wintertime. Yeah, it's indoors, but it's still cold in here. The ice and snow is not going to melt right away. So operator safety is by far one of our biggest concerns, so they're all required to wear safety harnesses, tie off when they climb up on those things. But yeah, they're huge, and until you walk up and stand next to one, the scale of it is kind of difficult to understand.
And then how do you know what's inside? Obviously, you place the order, it's supposed to arrive, but what are the markings outside that would indicate what is on the interior?
The outside, it's going to be the car number there. So in this case, it's XO, MX, and then you've got a 6-digit code beyond that. That's going to correspond to the report that we get from the rail yard that says that particular container is containing this. But then also we do 100% first inspection upon arrival. So we'll take a sample from this tanker that says it's product X, we'll send it up to the lab, and they do testing on it to actually confirm that it is in fact that product.
So never do you rely on the paperwork. You always check to make sure 100% of the time it is what it says it is.
Yes, we 100% check everything that comes into this building. So whether it's in a rail car, a tanker truck, a tote, 55-gallon drum, a 5-gallon pail, it doesn't matter. Everything is sampled upon arrival and tested.
Is that normal in the industry?
I would say we're somewhat of an anomaly. In many cases, people are going to rely on the C of A that's provided by their supplier. The C of A is the license plate, and it's got all that testing information on it. I would say a lot of companies do just rely on that because the testing process, it takes time. Certainly there's cost involved with that to run the test, the people to do the tests. AMSOIL wants to make sure that our products are exactly what we say they are, and also we're testing for quality standards as well. So an incoming raw material, it has to be within the specifications that we have for that material. The only way to truly guarantee that is by doing the testing.
Have you ever had something come in that was different than what it was labeled as?
We have had that. It is very, very rare, but it does happen. People are people. Mistakes happen, and that's again where that incoming testing is important. All of our raw material tanks that we have are not general use tanks. They are devoted to a particular material. So if you were to pump 30,000 gallons of this into the wrong tank, you're going to have probably a big problem. In some cases, like if it's a base oil, may not be that big of a deal. Maybe it's a viscosity variation or something like that. But there are other things where when you mix them, they truly, from a chemical level, don't play nice with each other, and then you got a big problem.
So is that what these are, 30,000 gallons each, the rail cars?
They're typically between 30 to 33,000 gallons.
And this, I would say this room that we're in, this annex for, again, having 6 rail cars and tanker trucks is probably, 300 by 100 in terms of size?
That's
300 feet by 100?
Yeah, that's probably pretty close.
Okay. So just so you guys can imagine. So imagine, it's 300 feet long. It's about a football field. It's about 100 feet wide. There's roll-up doors on each side. The cars get rolled in, and then there are stainless steel valves and overhead piping and things like that to transfer the fluid. And then think of it as like a gas station on the tanker truck side where they drive in, they can hook up and drive out.
Are you taking the oil out of the bottom and letting gravity feed it, or are you sucking it out of the top somehow?
It's a combination of what you said. So it's going to be taken out of the bottom, so it is gravity induced, but we are actively pumping everything. So in order to get it up, over, and into the tank that it would go in, the head pressure in this vessel is not big enough to overcome that. So we, as you can see on the floor here, we have a number of different pumps. Everything is actively pumped out into the tank that it goes into.
So after you pump out from these tankers and it goes, I'm guessing, into some sort of holding vessels inside?
Yep.
And then from there, is that where we're going next?
Yeah, we will go check out what's known internally as the North Tank Farm.
Yep.
That's something, again, from a scale perspective, is really hard for people to understand without seeing it. There are 37 50,000 gallon tanks in that space.
Wait, one more time. 37 50,000 gallon tanks.
Correct.
So when I was 14 years old, there was a place called the Tank Farm. So my dad worked for a division of Chevron. My job for that summer was taking a weed whacker and walking around the oil fields in Huntington Beach and doing weed abatement to make sure there's no fires that could light near the oil wells.
Right.
And so the place we based out of was the Tank Farm. When I think of Tank Farm, I have really fond memories of my first job when I was about 14 years old.
Luckily, it's inside. You don't have to worry about doing any weed abatement while you're here. Again, we got to keep the stuff.
Did you see the PTSD? I was shaking a little bit when you said Tank Farm.
I saw your hands get a little twitchy. I wanted to make sure you understood. You don't have to do that while you're here.
Okay, all right, I'm ready to go then.
All right, let's go into the tank farm.
Why'd you do that?
Because it was cool and I got echo. You want to do it with me?
No.
1, 2, 3. Ready? Oh, come on. Okay, Holman, this is a whole nother level of impressive.
No, this is the first level. There's actually another level above us.
I don't think they're going to let us in the level above us. Okay, now, Darren, we are in a tank farm, and it quite literally is a tank farm.
And there's no weeds. I'm super excited about that.
It's all cement. Now, the tanks appear to be, I'm going to guess, the tanks appear to be about 15 to 20 feet in diameter, and then about
3 stories high,
50, 60 feet tall.
They are 44 feet tall. So yeah, like I said, each one of these is 50,000 gallons. Almost all of these tanks, this one isn't, that one is, are jacketed. So they've got a heating jacket around them because, again, a lot of this stuff we need to keep warm. You may have noticed in this area, it's kind of warm anyway. We just generally keep this area hotter because it makes it that much easier to keep the raw materials warm as well. This is where all of our stuff that is coming in from the rail spur where we were just at is stored. So that's where I was saying we need those pumps to get it over here and then actually get it up into these.
It's quite a distance. I mean, we just walked 1,000 feet over here.
Yeah, it's a good distance. Everything is hard plumbed. All of these tanks are plumbed individually, and again, like I said, each one of these is dedicated to a particular product.
So that way, if something's staying inside the line after you pumped it, right? Because there's always going to be a little bit of residue. You don't have to worry about it because it's always the same product in the same tanks.
Precisely, yeah. And you're right. There's always a little bit in there. Something that I'll show you guys later, we have what's called a pigging system, and we do pig some of these lines, and a pig is just basically a rubber plug that you're using
that you
compressed
drag
air.
through the lines.
You use compressed air and you just fire it through the lines, and it scours the inside. It gets them completely clean, but you can't pig everything. So that's where the dedicated tanks come in.
They use pigs on some of the big oil lines.
Yes.
That go, like they go across the country.
Yes.
To clean out and move things along.
Yeah, and it's exactly the same thought process. Yeah. It's just a big plug, and in our case, when I say big, it's like a 3 or 4 inch diameter rubber plug that compressed air goes through. The ones you're talking about are 3-4 feet in diameter.
Yeah, huge.
But the thought process is the same, and it's just to scour the inside of that, get everything out of it, so you've got a clean surface to work with.
So one thing I'm noticing while we're visiting your lovely state of Wisconsin and Minnesota, it's humid here. So what happens inside the tanks? Do you have humidity buildup or water buildup, and how do you separate the raw materials from any moisture that gets into the tanks?
Honestly, these tanks don't have a lot of humidity buildup, so that's really not an issue that we deal with. It doesn't typically get crazy humid here where you have that level of buildup. We did have a few warm days this summer that got to the low 90s.
Yeah.
When I say a few, you can count them on one hand. But we don't have a lot of issues with water in our product, so that's not anything where we're running a separator or something of that nature to get the water.
So this facility in Texas would probably have different equipment to get rid of some of that water that you don't need.
Yes, correct. Texas, you're going to have that extremely hot summer. You're going to have a lot higher humidity unless you're out in the desert areas. Your tanks are going to be different. You're going to have, a skimmer system or something like that would pull water and other potential contaminants out. Here in northern Wisconsin, it's just not needed.
What's in these tanks? Is there any kind of a mixing device, a big arm that goes around like a blender, or is it just like 100% empty in there, just thousands of gallons of oil?
It's 100% empty, and it's just thousands of gallons of oil or additive or whatever the raw material is. So yeah, once they get in these, there's no mixing required. Our products don't have, sediment that falls out or anything like that. They are a homogeneous product. The only mixing that happens is during the blending process, and we'll cover that later.
So as we walk through the aisles here, there's no way for you guys, we'll have to take a picture because it looks like it's, forgive me, but it's out of a horror movie where there's some kind of a monster chasing you through a factory and these giant blue tanks. And by the way, they're all blue, kind of a deep blue. Everything is painted blue. And it just goes on and on and on.
The blue is actually a particular color. It's a particular shade of blue, and it's AMSOIL blue.
Oh, well, there you go.
So, yeah, when we get this, it's got its own Pantone number and all that. It's a particular shade of blue.
So, walking through here, everything is so precise. Every valve, every nut is clocked the same direction. Like, it is all so precise in here. There's nothing is left to chance.
No, the maintenance crew, like I said before, they do a phenomenal job, and they are very, very detail oriented. And for our industry, it really has to be. Again, like I've said a couple times, we're on the shores of Lake Superior. If a leak happens, it's a big deal. And actually, even the building that we're in, you can see how the concrete wall goes up. This whole building is designed as a containment. So God forbid one of these tanks sprung a leak somehow, it's not going anywhere. It's going to stay right where we're at. You can see the trench drain on the floor. That is by design. And we have pumps that are activated when a float goes up. And there are 2 giant empty tanks that are on the backside of this building, and they're kept empty all the time. That is in case a leak were to happen, it goes into the trench drain and then it is pumped into those tanks to clean this area out, but then also to give us time so we can figure out, all right, what do we need to do? What agencies do we need to call, whatever. But at the end of the day, it never left our building. It never hit the ground. It stayed in a concrete berm and then went straight into a steel tank.
And speaking of the ground, it's super clean in here. You would maybe, I've gone to Walmart where my feet stick to the floor, and I'm walking around here and there's nothing on the floor. There's no residue, there's no puddles, there's no oil, there's no film. It's as nice as a sidewalk outside.
We have very high standards here, and that was something, again, that started with Al in his time in the military. He has very exacting standards, and that's something that really AMSOIL has continued and is part of the cultural DNA of this organization. I spent a good chunk of my career working in food manufacturing, and I tell people the cleanliness of this plant rivals food manufacturing.
I'm seeing every pipe here is welded. There aren't like V-bands, and everything is hardline and welded. There's no soft tubes.
Yeah, everything is welded, and actually, if you look at some of the bends here, these are called soft 90s, and that is specifically for being able to pig, clean them out. If you have a hard 90-degree angle, trying to get a rubber plug to go around that corner is going to be pretty tough. So, both through here as well as in our blending area, that's all you'll see are those soft 90-degree angles. And the welding, you can see the bump where there's an exterior weld. If you were to take a camera and look inside, it's welded on the inside too. So there is a seamless joint there inside that pipe.
Holy mackerel. All right, what's next? I don't think you can impress us more than you already have, but let's try.
Next on the docket is blending.
I have a feeling he's going to impress us yet again. No less high-tech than the last place we were at, and now we are in the blending area, is that correct?
Yes, now we're in the control center, so to speak, of blending. So we're here with Steve and Tim. They are the brains behind this operation. So if you see the screens here, they're actually doing all of the blending that happens. So between Tim, Steve, and Jason, they yesterday did almost 50,000 gallons in a single shift.
Okay, so Steve, you said that you've been here for 42 years?
42 years, yes.
Have you been a blender the entire time, or is that a job you grew into?
Well, I'd say probably about 32 years maybe blending.
So in the early days, did you have like a vat and a big oar, and now you're pushing a button on a computer? Like, what has evolved over the time?
Pretty close to that. You had one hopper. You didn't have the 3 hoppers we have now.
Okay.
For the A, B, and C hoppers, yeah.
Just for fun, what was a day at work? How many gallons would you have blended back in the day versus what you guys are capable of doing now?
I don't know, maybe 13 to 20,000. Because
Okay.
we had, you had B1 that was 1,400 gallons. B8 was 1,400 gallons. MO2 was 7,000, I think it was. B3 was 10,000. So they weren't very big blends, and our biggest one I think was 13,000 was B4.
And what's today like a good day of production?
Well, you do that in a day easily. It varies, depends on how many blends, the sizes, of course, because our tanks now are 22,000. So just one blend, you can get that easily.
More than what you would have done back then?
Yes, absolutely.
So did you help develop the system? Or did it evolve you evolved with it as new technology came online?
Yeah, I started in 1983. So you had your basic, maybe 10, 13 guys at the other plants, the workers. You had a few warehouse guys, stuff like that. Then Alan came in and he put in the whole pigging systems and all that stuff when he first arrived.
And is it true that you got rid of all those guys so you could be here the longest?
Yeah. I figured out ways to get them out of here.
Hey, wait a minute. I'm next in line.
Have you guys always worked together?
Pretty much. He was here 1 year in production before he came in the blending.
Yes.
Do you guys ever fight?
Not really, no.
We're getting too old for that.
That's right, setting in.
So what is it about AMSOIL that has made you guys want to stay for so long? I mean, it's so rare these days.
It's steady. Yeah, and they've always treated us good here, so.
Talk us through the process. We're looking at a series of screens. It's all levels of tanks and ways of mixing things, and there's a million valves and pipes above our heads, to the left and the right. Generally speaking, how does it work? Are you taking a small amount of an additive and putting it in a very large amount of oil? How does it work?
Like this is your blending sheet right here. It kind of gives, it's like a recipe. So when we start off, you go, like, see, A hitter here, and then you hit formulas. I don't want to click her now because we're in the middle of something. But then it will give you all these chemicals. We have to go through it, click them, make sure everything's fine. And then we have to open up our tanks, hook up our hoses. Then we come back, start it, make sure that everything's going correctly. And once we know everything's going in our tanks, that everything's fine, then we start doing our drums.
And what's in the drums?
Different additives.
Oh, the additives.
Stuff like this, yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
So again, we're taking relatively small amounts of the additives with drums, putting it in a blender basically, and that sends it into the much larger tank. So you might take a 50-gallon drum of something and put it into a 50,000-gallon tank.
Like your peppers and your salts, you add it to the big blend, but most of it's coming through additive packages, viscosity improvers and whatnot. So it goes through our system, gets heated up, metered, and it automatically shuts down when you get what you need.
And one thing I'd say is that Steve and Tim, while they didn't do the programming, a lot of the way that this functions is from their knowledge and what was put into this by the programmers. So the platform we use is nice because it's very configurable, but with Steve and Tim's knowledge, they were the ones that really kind of helped design this system and get it to function the way that it does.
Take us through how it actually physically gets over to this area. You've got forklifts that carry the drums over. The drums then, they tilt over and they pour into a vat. And then the vat is only waist high, a little bit higher than that.
We got a forklift that lifts it right up and over, so we don't have to, there's no manual labor really. It's the machinery that will lift it up and above that hopper.
So what's happening when it pours it into that hopper? What's happening in that
hopper? At that particular time it's being weighed, and when you get to the amount, you just cap off the drum.
What tells that line to feed one of these many tanks that are behind us? Like, how do you route that particular additive to the correct 15,000-gallon tank?
Oh, well, say for example, like this one is 314. We'll go and we'll open up our tank, the header system. Then we'll also do all our double checks to make sure that everything else is closed. And we also have a thing on our screen here. I'll show you this header layout, which will show you that 314 is open.
Oh, no kidding. So we're looking at a single screen right now. The monitor, and it has
a schematic
of
basically
all the
the blending tanks.
Yep. Yeah. And it shows us how many. One's 41% full, one's 66% full, and then you can see by little arrows, open or closed, how the valves are configured.
So you're blending the additives at the tank level, not remotely, right? Because the amount would be stuck in a long pipe if you did it remotely.
No, everything gets metered and heated right here.
Right here.
Yes, and at the very end we do a pigging system that squeeges every little drop out of the pipes.
And that way you make sure those are mounts over that
nothing-
travel. The pipe
nothing's
is
wasted.
Our formula here says that we have 5 hookups. We go up on the skid and we'll do our 5 hookups, so they all go into the blend at the same time. Like in the good old days, we used to do 1 hose at a time. But now we got all 5 going at the same time, so actually everything's mixing on the way to tank 314, and then we turn the recirculation on too as it gets to 314, and that gets recirculated. So by the time we get done with the blend, we can probably sample it, send it up to the lab within an hour, and it gets passed and approved, and we're off to the races with the next blend.
So the blending is happening on the way to the tank and in the tank itself, and that's it. It takes care of itself.
Yeah, blends that don't have a lot of thick stuff, you can actually sample it in probably about 15 minutes.
Quite a science going on, just the blending. And the amount of, if you had to guess, how many miles of tubing and pipes do you have just in this section alone? It's got to be a couple miles worth of...
I thought they said 5 miles at one time.
3 to 5 miles, yeah. Easily.
Well, awesome. Thanks for showing us how you guys do the blending. That's pretty amazing.
We get some stickers like that too? You guys got all the good stickers.
I got the one on me that says blowout, and another one says rework.
And rejected.
And rejected, yeah. I've earned all these the hard way, gentlemen.
Well, you come back tomorrow and we'll show you how to do this. And
oh yeah, he'll put you to work.
You gotta
bring donuts?
Oh, I bring donuts?
Oh, we can do that.
All right, gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
So at this point, we've seen incoming raw material in the rail spur, we've seen the storage process in the north tank farm. We've now covered blending, and we will move on to the packaging process.
All right, let's do it. Wow, look at this machine. All right, where are we now?
Right now, we are in the heart of our packaging operation. So on the right-hand side, we have our quart line. On the left-hand side, we have what's known as the multi-line. The quart line does exclusively quart bottles, AMSOIL quart bottles. We typically package about 200 to 205 bottles per minute. This line will do 15,000 gallons in a shift. On the other side, we have our multi-line, which is a larger package size. So we'll do 1 gallon jugs and 2.5 gallon twin packs on this line. Does fewer bottles per minute based on the size of those bottles, but it's relatively comparable as far as overall gallons output during the day.
Still around that 15 gallon a shift?
15,000, yes.
So then overhead, I see you've got these dark blue or black lines, and those are coming from the large 15 to 50,000 gallon tanks, and those are being injected into the bottles.
Yes, those are all the pack lines coming overhead. You can see on both of these lines, there are what are known as filter platforms. Each filter platform has, I think it's 9 different filters on it. Those are different micron filtering sizes. So before anything actually goes into a final goods package, whether it be a quart bottle, gallon, whatever, it is run through those filters. That's all specified by the lab. So it is essentially filtered immediately before going into a bottle.
Wow. There's so many quality checks on the way to the bottle.
Again, that's one of the cornerstones of AMSOIL is the quality that we give to our customers. So to a certain degree, you know, you can think of it as almost being over-processed or over-engineered, but it's not. When that's really the company's name and their reputation on the line, it requires that level of reassurance.
So while you're talking, I don't know if you noticed, but there's a basically the machine that takes a stack of flat pack boxes, opens it up, and then rolls it down the line, had a jam. So the lady that was working down there waved to the supervisor, I guess, and then he came over, they unjammed it. But then that kind of led me to look downstream. So here's a conveyor in front of us. The boxes are flat, they get opened up, they go down. Above that is the line where the bottles are being filled and the caps are going on and the labels are going on. And then they're meeting just down here, boxes and bottles, and being dropped in the boxes. It's fascinating to watch the choreographing that goes on between all those little processes to just have a packaged box on the other end.
And all these pieces of equipment are tied together through our PLC or process control system. So if a sensor underneath the line there where the boxes are going, if they detect that there's no box for the bottles to go in, they don't drop. Then the line just starts to back up and eventually it gets to the labeler. All right, they can't go any further, the labeler shuts down. So everything is daisy chained together and they'll keep running until they get to a point and then they stop.
And it seems like there's a little bit of a buffer at each place. So one
part further upstream can still run a bit.
Yes.
If something downstream gets clogged or jammed. So as long as you can fix that box process fast enough, you're not going to run out of boxes for those finished bottles to be able to go into place.
Correct. And like you said, they had a jam here. They were able to fix it. The upstream stuff doesn't necessarily have to stop.
Yeah.
And if you fix it quickly enough, it will never stop because everything downstream will catch up.
You know what it is? This is Saturday afternoon traffic on the 405 through Los Angeles.
I was thinking it was Laverne and Shirley.
It's like an inchworm. It just inchworms through it.
I've been to California. I would say that this is better than the 405. Yeah, we don't have anybody trying to eat chocolates as they're going down the line.
I noticed none of these bottles were on their cell phone.
No. One thing that we're employing, the multi-line, is vision-based detection. So it's looking for certain attributes of a label, and that way as it goes by, if the label doesn't match those specified attributes, it will say, hey, something's wrong here. And it's just going to be another check that's computerized. You're not relying on a person that maybe isn't doing what they're supposed to be doing, they're asleep at the wheel, whatever, but it's looking for a color, a shape, certain.
Is that why that machine was blinking when Lightning walked by when his label said rework on it? It detected him while he was, okay.
It visualized me head to toe, like Terminator does, and said rework, and then it gave me a blowout. Exactly, the blowout sticker. All right, Darren, before we wrap up this particular segment of the tour, talk me through that crazy machine over there that looks like a hopper, where I see the guys putting in all the empty gray bottles, and then they go through the filling station. That filling station is unlike anything I've ever seen.
The filling station here, it's made by a company called Waitpack. They're an Italian company. The great thing about that filler is it's fast, but the biggest thing is it is hyper accurate. So each pedestal that an individual bottle rides on is a scale. So when the bottle goes in as an empty bottle, it's weighing that and saying, okay, this bottle weighs X. I need to add this many grams to make it the right weight.
So it knows even the inconsistency in an empty bottle.
Yes. And that way the filler is hyper accurate. The old style fillers that we have that were more gravity fed, there's a lot greater variation that can happen with that, especially in oil where there's a lot of different viscosities.
Well, and over 15,000 gallons a day, that adds up to a huge increase in efficiency too, right?
Yes. Yeah, we're actually able to make technically smaller blends now and wind up with the same amount of packaging because we're accurate. The way that AMSOIL used to always do it, and this is common amongst companies with not high degree of accuracy in their fillers, is they overfill intentionally. We will not short our customer. We're going to give you a little bit extra just to make sure you always get what you paid for. That's exactly what AMSOIL did.
Everything comes out of the bottle is what you need, and even if there's little left in there, you're covered.
Yes, exactly. You're not going back saying, hey, I was shorted 10 grams. What the heck, I couldn't finish my oil change. This is going to ensure that it is the right amount every time, no matter what.
I can't get past this filling machine. It looks like something that's created for food and not oil.
I think you're right. It's 100% manufactured out of stainless steel. A lot of the fittings are such that are used in the food industry, and if you talk to the manufacturer, they would tell you that the vast majority of the people that buy this line are using it for a food application. We just happen to use it for oil.
We're seeing, again, the raw bottles come in one side and they go out the other. Just this machine has a footprint of 10, 15 feet wide, 8 feet deep, and about 8 foot tall. The bottles come in one side, they get filled, and they get capped and go out the other side complete, minus the label.
Yes, at this point, without the minus the label, it is essentially a sellable finished item. There are 24 fill heads. We've got, I believe, it's 16 capping heads. And this machine, if configured properly, will run 240 bottles a minute. We typically run about 200, but we're making line upgrades to get to that 240 mark. It's a relatively new piece of equipment. It's only been with AMSOIL for just over 3 years.
All right, now Darren's dropping us off in Lisa's office. Ooh, this is the laboratory.
Lisa Sorensen, and she has, as we always say on the podcast, the more words you have in your title, the more important you are. She has chemical laboratory director, so that sounds pretty important.
Now, Elise, do you say laboratory or laboratory?
I say laboratory.
Laboratory, okay. And we also have Paul. Paul, how you doing? What's your last name?
Paul Riedel.
Paul, nice to meet you. So we're in Elise's office now. Elise, you have kind of the penthouse window into the lab here, and you are overseeing staff, I assume.
Yeah.
So at what point are you in the inception phase or the corrective phase, or
are you in the phase where somebody says we need this? You go, yeah, we can't do that, but we can do something close.
We are in all of those spaces. We have our hands in everything, I would say, at AMSOIL. We are working with our market managers, our development engineers. We're helping define what the product can and should be, so that as it gets into the design phase with our chemists, we're working on the right things and building in the performance in the right areas. And then getting it into the lab and really building up that performance, testing it, putting it through all of its paces so that when it gets to the customer, we have the right solution going to them. So that also includes our work with production to make sure quality is up to snuff.
So I'm curious, obviously there's different categories. It might be gear lube, it might be lubrication, it might be grease, it might be all the different things, car care products. I'm guessing all that passes through the lab. For each of those categories, do you typically have, over the years, there's been a lot of development. Do you have like a base formula that you're like, oh, we can go to 21A, that'd be perfect for this? Or is everything a brand new, unique venture?
You're talking about building blocks?
I'm talking about, developing products. Do you have like a catalog of things you've already figured out that you build upon? Or do you start fresh every time and say, well, this is a new approach, we have to go from zero?
I'd say there's a little bit of both. There's a lot of experience on the team at AMSOIL, from customer experiences through formulation development. So we leverage that every time we can to make sure we're putting the right thought into the new products, but we also bring in fresh ideas. So depending on the need for the customer, maybe there are some new chemistries or new components that we would want to take a look at to see if they can really bring that performance to the table. So we balance both sides of that.
I feel like I want to zero-base the conversation. We're in the lab, and you guys can't see this, but it's white floors, it's ducting and venting everywhere. There's all sorts of, that looks like coffee makers and cappuccino machines that have nothing to do with anything you'd ever drink, right? And we're in her office looking out, and it just makes me think, where do all of the raw goods and chemicals come from, and how did you get the base understanding for these things? So, for example, you're a chemist.
And way smarter than both of us put together.
Correct. We don't even know where these things come from, right? Like that's how I want to start, right? Paul, you want to start?
I'll jump on that one. So Elise, a lot of people here in our team, we attend trade shows and different industry conferences. We work with great vendors out there that provide raw materials for us. And so really it's a team approach. And you mentioned all the instruments, but you don't mention much of the chemicals because we do keep them somewhat separated out so that way it's just a little bit cleaner out there. But we work with a lot of different vendors, great vendors, and they understand kind of our needs, and they actually will work with us to solve some of these problems as well. So it's not even just our team here, but we really work across the industry.
So you occasionally just go shopping. If you have to make a new lubricant, a new grease or something like that, you know what you want the end goal to be, but then how you have to make it. It's like making a pizza, right? You can make a good pizza or one that's awful. Although I haven't had many awful pizzas.
I've definitely had awful pizza.
Yeah, there's a lot of componentry we can bring into our design. So as Paul mentioned, we have great relationships with a broad supply base so that we can leverage existing chemistries, new chemistries, and have good partners that work with us on our design goals to bring in the right performance.
So what goes into a good chemical lab for this? Like, what are the people? What are the skill sets? What are the machines? How do you decide, we have this lab? How do you know what equipment to even have?
Oh, gosh. That's a lot of questions.
I know. I asked. I'm very efficient.
Are you
I
building
asked,
your own lab?
Maybe. I asked 3 at a time, 4 or 5 at a time, and then I just try and be quiet after that.
So a loaded question, but
Yes.
a lot of good information we can share. So talent is key. You can have a lab full of equipment.
Well, let's strike one against our own lab right there, Lightning. So
One man down.
all right. So that's not going to work for us.
So people are key in any lab. Equipment without good operators is pretty much a really great paperweight. So as Paul mentioned, we have chemists, technicians, chemical engineers in our team, lots of experience and lots of training to both design the formulations as well as run all of the different tests that we would need to do. So that comes with education as well as just
So what
experience.
kind of degrees do people have to be a chemist in the lab?
So typical degrees would be a degree in chemistry as well as chemical engineering. Both are pretty prevalent in our industry.
So it's important for everyone to note that you guys are not buying an oil and then adding a couple little things to it and then putting a label on it and shipping it out to us, the customer.
And there are a lot of companies that do that. They white label, add some additives, and then they put them on the shelf.
Like, this is
Your
AMSOIL's formulation from the get-go. So you're even specifying the exact base oil, the raw goods that you're starting with. Is that correct?
Definitely, yeah. So it has to meet AMSOIL's performance requirements. And so that starts with the base oils themselves, and that is integral because base oils really impart a lot of performance to an oil.
And when we say base oil, we're talking about a petroleum product.
When we talk base oil, you can't necessarily call it petroleum exclusively because base oils can be anywhere from raw crude all the way up to a highly synthesized molecule. And that's Group 5 if you were really into the base oil kind of lingo, which is any other type of fluid. So it could be an ester, or even a vegetable oil if you needed it in an application. So there's a selection, a down selection, if you will, for performance on how the product needs to perform, and it starts with the base oil, which is really fundamental. And it is also probably the largest component of an oil as well, generally, too.
And then just to describe that synthetic oils don't magically appear from the synthetic oil machine, that there is some petroleum in it, it's been refined in a certain way. Like, what makes that different from the bottle of conventional oil that's sitting on the shelf and then a bottle of synthetic next to it? What's the major difference that a consumer should know about?
The big difference between synthetic and a conventional or mineral type oil is really how much it's been pure, how pure it is, how clean, how engineered that product is. And so the synthetic type oils are going to give you better oxidation for extended drains, possibly give you better low pour points, better volatility. They really speak to their performance is what synthetic
It's
oils
almost
do.
like a designer oil in a sense, right? Like you're shooting for, you just mentioned a few different features, I guess, that an oil could have. So you're basically taking whatever comes out of the ground. It starts as, old dinosaur juice and then goes through a process. But when you guys are making your product, you're saying we need X, Y, and Z. So we're going to design that into our product to make sure that it's very specific to what our consumer needs are.
Very much, absolutely, yes. We design the fluids to meet the needs for that requirement. And that's where the engineers and the whole product development team really, I think, do a good job, is we set basically a list of requirements for what that product needs to be. And a lot of times that base oil does come in there. Now, when you say it comes out of the ground, some of it doesn't. Some of it is...
Wait, what?
Yeah. Some of it could be natural origin. Some of it can be
greasy teenagers' faces.
Right, exactly. That's oil.
Oh, that's actually their brand new product. They haven't announced it yet.
Greasy teenage face
oil.
Oil.
We're breaking that live here to the Truck Show Podcast. Now, I would assume that you guys get along really well with the
Elise's face when I said that was cringe.
So is mine. I would assume you guys get along well with the product. Guys are coming in and saying, "Hey, we need this," or is it like Anchorman fights in the park? After work, where you guys are bringing like AMSOIL bottles and chains to fight it out for whoever gets to win of what how that product becomes.
I think an Anchorman style fight could be interesting. But
who wears the gladiator gear?
Definitely the chemist.
No, we all work really well together. We are a big team of collaborators, so everyone has different perspectives, experiences, and that all really shows itself in the products that we can build.
So if they come to you and they say, "Hey, we need shiny unicorn lube," or something like that, are you guys like, "Yeah, I don't know how we're gonna," or do you guys huddle and go, "Oh, this is gonna be awesome. This is a great challenge. Let's figure it out"? As they're obviously a collaborative environment, you want to be able to deliver something that nobody else has. Mm-hmm. But is that like a fun challenge for you guys? Is that like, "Oh, we hadn't thought about that before. Let's see if we can do this"?
Yeah. The fun challenges are the best ones to work on.
Paul's over here writing down shiny unicorn lube over here.
If you were to take synthetic oil and conventional oil and put it under a microscope, would you see a difference between the two? I know, like, you'll look sometimes and somebody go, conventional oil has rectangular and parallelogram molecules, and synthetic has ball-bearing beads and things like that. Is that a real thing? Is that something that you would see?
Not with your eyes.
Okay, well, definitely not with my eyes.
Chemical techniques, I mean, in theory, you can distinguish the differences between base stocks. So as Paul mentioned, there are chemical attributes that as a base oil becomes more refined or as it becomes chemically synthesized from certain types of feedstocks, it does build the molecules up differently. And we can measure those in terms of certain characteristics. It could be level of unsaturated molecules, how uniform the molecular structures are, which can be imparted by different types of, again, processes in that refining and or synthesis process.
So what goes into refining? I know it's something that we said. So I know this is you have to tell two morons like how the sun makes power. I get that, but so when you're explaining to really slow people like Lightning and myself, what's the basic process of refining? Like what is the outcome? So I have a cup of oil that needs to be refined, and I want to get it into this cup on the other side of the room or something. What is that in really general terms?
Purifying, ultimately, and processing, right? So,
well, you're not running it through a strainer. Are you heating it up? Are you how are you distilling this to its best form before you start putting your additives in it?
So for us, we are not necessarily refining. We are working with others who may do that or who may synthesize these molecules. So like Paul mentioned, there is a host of base oils that can be used depending on the customer needs. Some could be refined, some could be vegetable oil. We focus more on what the attributes of that needs to be after a supplier has run it through the process to make sure it's free of certain impurities. In the case of certain synthetics, there could be different catalysts that were used in its manufacturing, and we need to make sure our base oils are free of those types of contaminants. So that when it comes into our products and we're using it, it brings the right performance to the table. So that's where our focus is in the development process.
Paul, how often have you guys rejected products that you've said, all right, we have been tasked with from either sales or marketing or heads of the company, Mr. Amatuzzi says, I want to make whatever, right? And then you order all the ingredients, and then one of the ingredients that you thought was going to prevail failed in the field. It just didn't hold up. Does that happen often or no?
Not really. We do a pretty good job validating our products where...
Meaning, not after you've made it, cooked it. Like this is the dough before you've made the pizza.
Oh, okay.
So you ordered all the pepperoni and the dough and all that stuff, right? And then you make the dough and the flour turns out to be
iterating at the
defective.
moment, and so you're choosing your formulas, and maybe like is there a certain percentage of failure rate as you're going through where you guys are like, oh yeah, this is great, it didn't pass this one test?
From a design of experiment standpoint, absolutely. Failure is a good thing to experience in the lab because then we can actually iterate to your point and find those bounds, find those limits. And so yes, we've experienced bad dough. However, it's been caught and well managed, and I think we've sourced and probably made a really good pizza from the components that
Did you see what just happened there?
I know, see?
Paul just figured out how to talk to two morons.
All right.
Now we totally understand.
Me talk pepperoni, understand them.
Yeah. No. It is not complicated, but it is complicated in that the concept's very simple. It's just when you get into the details, of course it's going to sound complicated. But an oil have very simple properties, but we just push them to the limits. And so validating to make sure, so there's not really quote unquote bad dough out there. There's just better dough. And so that's where the value proposition we work really hard at is to push those limits, make a calzone.
Okay.
I like that.
Snap, high five. Right there, calzone.
All right,
reference.
so here's a question that I'm sure our listeners might have. When you're formulating something, do you also formulate shelf stability into it? Because obviously there's big warehouses, there's distribution, there's trucks that are hot, trucks that are cold. Or there's a guy who went out and bought gear lube and he used 2.5 bottles. And he's got half a bottle that's sitting in his shop on his workbench or whatever for the next time. What is the shelf life of a product, or does it vary? And is that something that you actively are working into the formula to ensure that you've got stability if they're in the bottle before it's being used?
So as Paul mentioned, when we go into any design effort, we have a set of requirements. They can vary by product. When it comes to shelf stability and shelf life, however, that would be a very standard test that is put across every product that comes through the lab.
Interesting. Okay. Is that one of the few things that is standard across everything that you do?
There's other things that are pretty just standard ways we test things, I
Yeah.
would say. But that is one thing that is required for sign-off on the formula we develop. It has to go through its paces to ensure that the packaging it's going into has good compatibility, so it's not going to have issues when it's being stored and packaged, as well as, again, from the shelf life perspective, that it can meet our typical requirements. Or if there is something unique about it, that we make sure it is known to the consumer that maybe you need to use it up in a shorter period of time.
Or you have to shake the bottle. Is there anything that needs to be
Not
shaken?
paint.
Well, I don't know. Do additives like settle inside a motor oil bottle on a shelf, or are they always suspended? Like,
Generally, you should not have to worry about shaking your product.
Okay. So it's not a Polaroid picture.
Yeah. Right. I think there's one product in our portfolio that's used for firearms that does have a shake. I always give it the Polaroid shake, but I don't think it's even needed there. So
Interesting. Okay.
So let's go through. What do you want to start with the lab here? Where does where would you start with testing a base oil, that type of thing?
I guess I would start with our quality area with our technicians, where the raw materials would come into the lab, where it would be entered in and logged, and then also tested for its basic properties, so making sure it meets our specifications for that raw material. And that would be done on the benches as you come into the lab. You'll see there's some oil flowing through what we have our viscometers. It manages a very precise temperature.
Let's go over here.
All right.
Jay just wants to see a viscometer up close.
Yeah.
I can feel the heat radiating off this machine.
Right. So this is one of our sets of viscometers. This is a kind of, we have a more electronic version or an automated version as well, but we do bring it back to a very common method for measuring how thick or how thin something is. And so that's a lot of our base oils in particular, even some additives. We want to make sure hit certain targets for viscometrics, because that is really critical for engines as well as most of our products.
Without describing this exact tool, but what is the concept for how this works? You're pushing. There's a bunch of test tubes.
This particular viscosity method is ASTM D445, and it is a Canon-Finsky type apparatus where you measure flow from the top of the tube, you draw it up, and you measure gravity pulls the fluid down, just as any thing. You measure how long it takes to go between two lines, and that distance or how long it takes can be calculated into what the viscosity is.
So imagine a glass tube, and it's in a U shape, and on one side it's a thicker diameter, on the other side it's a thinner diameter, and in the middle there's glass bulbs that are engineered into this glass tube where it flares out. And so it looks like something they would see in a really advanced science kit if you're a kid and you ever played with those science kits, but this is probably very expensive.
Yes.
and used for more than making volcanoes.
Right. Very calibrated. So there's good precision with what this does. But really the principle is, imagine a pouring water out down a water slide, right? How long it takes to get to the bottom of the slide is really viscosity.
Yeah. Syrup would take a lot longer.
Syrup would take longer than, say, water. And so that's kind of what we do. So these each have sort of different diameter circumference holes or water slides or tubes. They allow different flows, and so you just calculate based on time then.
And I assume the temperature has a great deal to do with that as well.
Absolutely, yeah. So temperature is critical to have really precise, and so there's two specific temperatures, 40°C and 100°C, that are very common in this test.
So you have a whole host of all sorts of different, and they're all numbered, labeled.
From very thin to very thick fluids. So
don't walk any closer, lighting. Those are
I'm
very
not gonna
expensive. Our budget does not include you breaking glass tubes in the AMSOIL lab.
If I just walked by casually, I wouldn't see much difference between them because it's so minute. But I assume that it makes a world of difference, just a millimeter or two.
Definitely, you can see it looks like almost like about a hair length width on that one, where this one is actually quite wide, several millimeters wide. And so they have they permit flow at different viscosities in a reasonable amount of time.
I like the old AMSOIL engine oil cans there too.
He's keeping it real.
This method is kind of the original. We have a more automated viscometer for a higher throughput that is more accurate because it's not human related, right? So we get more consistent results.
So we're moving through the lab here. Now this machine takes up the whole wall. This is 4 feet deep, 8 feet tall, and equally as wide. And what are we looking in here? There's a lot of tubes.
You'll see in a few areas of the lab some really fun, crazy-looking glassware. So we have a few different techniques to do oxidation studies.
Ooh, and so that is where the oil burns, basically. No?
I wouldn't say burns.
Ages?
Yeah, scientifically ages.
I like that.
Scientifically ages.
By the way,
but-
that band was opening up last night at the AMSOIL Arena.
Scientifically ages?
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's a controlled study. We don't burn the oil. That's not meaningful, although if an oil were to burn in one of our tests, that would definitely be a red flag that something is not right. These are more methodologies that can let us age oil in a meaningful way. So it's kind of you don't want to burn a turkey test, right? So you want to have maybe a lower temperature over a longer period of time.
If you're going to destroy the turkey, make it really dry. Don't make it into charcoal.
Exactly.
Got it.
So there is an art and a science to how oxidation studies are done. You could try to get a test done really, really fast by cranking the temperature up, but the meaningfulness of that result is null. Versus, again, just having a thought-out oxidation test that may have lower temperatures for certain durations of time, may include different types of catalysts, different types of gases. And so in our lab, again, we have a variety of them. Some are proprietary methods that have been developed over time. But essentially, they let us accelerate the testing to understand oil life. And that could be in I don't want to say simple, because it's not a simple test, but it could be in an oxidation study that is more representative, say, of an air compressor. So it's more of an oxygen environment.
Okay.
Other tests we have could be more akin to, say, an engine, where you're bringing in other types of reactive gases to accelerate that study. So what that lets us do is monitor viscosity increase over time. So we could run these tests for a few days, a few weeks, maybe even longer, to understand how the oil ages. Viscosity increase, we can monitor the additives and how they're performing in these tests.
Could we monitor Lighting's additives to see how he's aging and oxidizing?
He's talking about the pizza. No, so what does it mean on just a very basic level to oxidize? What does that mean? Because we throw that around as if everyone knows, oh, the oil oxidizes or anything oxidizes. What does it mean when a chemical oxidizes?
I would say when it breaks down. Start on the beginning of breaking down, right? Decomposing is another term. Oxidizing has a very chemical background.
Well,
where
Lighting brought up burning it, right? So fire is a way of oxidizing something, but rust is oxidizing too, and that has no heat to it at all.
That's actually, I was getting, you're hitting the perfect question there. Is oxidizing is a chemical term where essentially it's a transfer of electrons or a more stable state. It's a reaction of sorts. In oil, it oxidizes is like a decomposition. It's breaking it apart.
And when that happens, you're losing viscosity, you're losing some of the properties of the oil over time, you're losing the lubrication properties.
When it begins to oxidize, often it does start with cleavage or breakage of the base oils or additives, causing a very minimal thinning. But then you do see other properties take over that cause a gradual increase in viscosity. So an oil becoming more polar or getting more of those oxygens attached to that backbone will start to create glue, essentially.
In my mind, I'm thinking oil sludge. You didn't change your motor oil for 5 years, and you pop open the drain pan, and it just comes out in a gloopy sludge. So it doesn't necessarily break down and get thinner. It could get...
It's really the intermolecular attraction between these oil molecules, because they're now very polar, and so they're almost acting like a little bit more like a glue-like between one another, thickening up the product.
So you can it can go both ways, though. You can thin it depending on the oxidation, and thicken it.
Right, and it's really hard because depending on where you look at that picture, you can see one answer or another correct.
Interesting.
And then you throw in variables of fuel dilution or different type of additives that can cause change in viscosity, and it becomes a really complex kind of soup.
Well, now
with the food.
You're looking at, you talked about the air compressor oil, right, where the compressor pistons are just moving air up and down. Or you talk about an engine, a diesel or gas, where you might have the fuel leaking down the rings and contaminating the oil. Or you may be looking at a transmission fluid where you have clutch wear and things like that, or bearing wear in a gear loop. So oil being put into the final use case, it's not by itself. It has to be able to deal with whatever contamination is being created by the environment it's in.
Absolutely, yes. So there's definitely environmental considerations as well, and the impact on the performance, right? You mentioned transmission with clutch materials. An oxidized oil is going to handle differently, behave differently on that friction performance as well. So those are all considerations where it's important to test new oil, but it's also important to look at that used oil as well, or oxidized type of oil, and what that property has.
It's amazing if you think of, I mean, you guys think of it all the time, but for the average person, think of it, you've got an oil that lasts 10,000 miles, maybe a year in a vehicle, that is whatever mean room temperature is, or if it's winter, it can be negative whatever that temperature is. If it's summer, it can be positive whatever that temperature is, but it cycles through those thermal events every single time you drive the vehicle, and it goes from being stored at whatever the outside temperature is to having to be stable at whatever the engine wants that temperature to be. It's pretty amazing that a substance can go through all that and have, to your marketing, the long drain intervals, right? I mean, just think what oil goes through, let alone, again, the contaminants, clutch pack wear down, bearing wear, cylinder wall wear, rings, all of that kind of stuff, that's constantly contaminating the oil throughout that entire process.
Yes. That's whether you can just nod. Say yes. He didn't ask a question. He was telling you how to do your job.
I'm just thinking out loud.
Yeah, no, a lot of thought goes into all of those considerations in an application, and so we put all of that thought into the designs to make sure we can perform across the whole regime.
All right, so we're walking from one section to more lab materials. Now, wait, there's weights over here. This is not for someone working out. There are weights at the end of a lever. What does this machine do? What is this for?
This instrument here that you're looking at with these weights, they're calibrated weights, is used for a wide variety of different testing. It's a generally it exposes oil to different conditions, one of them being extreme pressure. So the more weights you add and the further out the way they go on this lever arm, the more pressure you will exert on that oil. And so we can actually weld steel and evaluate how an oil will either prevent that or aggravate that. So that's a good test here. We call it EP4 ball. We also can do different shear type testing, so spinning an oil fast enough where the molecules inside the oil start to not thermally break down, but actually physically get torn apart. And so we can measure the viscosity loss at that point.
Is that like if you go from a container to a film, like how the oil reacts as a film as it's getting thinned out, or surface to surface, or
it's generally a bearing where it just mechanically shears essentially the oil. So think of like a differential, for example, and so you don't want the mechanical churning in that application reducing viscosity and thereby reducing the film strength and causing wear. And so this gives us an ability to evaluate that without destroying differentials.
From a shear standpoint, as Paul was mentioning, so depending on how different products could be built, including competitors, different types of chemistries could be used, and some can actually be literally torn apart and cause permanent viscosity loss. Other chemistries can come in that are more robust, that can allow for, say, some more extended viscosity control. So this testing allows us to look at that from a shear perspective, so more of a permanent shear.
The machinery and the equipment in this lab varies considerably. Some are mechanical in nature, where you're physically just putting a grease between two metal pieces and squeezing it, versus this machine over here that literally looks like something I would see in a doctor's office to test blood, meaning that I can't see any external components. It's a big computer, and you feed some type of a test tube into it, and then it performs an analysis. So the breadth of equipment here is really fascinating to me. I mean, if you didn't know that this was a lab that tested lubricants, you'd think that you guys were running tests on the human genome or something. I mean, it's fascinating.
Yeah, so we do have a variety of test equipment. Some is very dedicated to lubricant analysis. So for example, as Paul was mentioning with the 4-ball, that is something that tests lubricant properties. What you see here is an ICP system, inductively coupled plasma optical emission spectroscopy, if you want a mouthful of words.
Wait, one more time slower?
It's ICP OES. So inductively coupled plasma optical emission spectroscopy. So this can be used in many different industries. Lubricant analysis is one. You could find this in a medical lab. Ours is dedicated to the analysis of lubricants. Typically, this is how we look for contaminants, understand the additive pack, so we can see upwards of 22 elements in our oils. We use this across the development process through supporting customers, working with our mechanical lab, doing used oil analysis. This is a widely used instrument to kind of help us fingerprint in some ways the elemental composition. So you can see your zinc, you can see calcium. If you're getting contamination, say in a used oil, you could see your silica start to creep up. Those are the examples. This is what you'd see in your oil analysis program if you were sending out for that type of program. We have that in-house. It's typically running every day. It sees a lot of work.
So this one looks like a refrigerator, but with 50C on the readout, that doesn't...
What is that in Fahrenheit, Lightning?
I don't know, but I think it's warm?
It's pretty warm. Probably pretty close to about 120 if I had to guess off the top of my head.
Okay.
I like the sign that has a hamburger and a soda on it with the red circle across through.
No food beverage for ice or human consumption.
Yeah, no, we have a no food policy in the lab. So you just never know.
Oh, did you take those M&Ms out of your pocket before you came in here?
I did not come in with any M&Ms. That's for later.
But no, it's a large, basically oven. Recreates some of the higher temperatures that a customer's product might see. And so we will test our formulations in either this oven or the other several different ovens and refrigerators to verify that the product is stable under normal conditions, especially some of our customers overseas. Some products will make it into a container. You can't control those temperatures as well. So we
should say that these are in their bottles. For example, 100% synthetic CVT fluid. And I see some additives in here. You have bottles. This is not like in test tubes. This is as I would buy it in a case, as packaged, right?
Yeah, for validating any changes, validating
this goes back to our previous discussion of shelf stability, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So this is where it is being done, right? So we do some quality checks. We verify over the life cycle of a product. We want to make sure that product is keeping contaminants out. It's also keeping the product in and making sure it's delivered properly for the customer.
And I would imagine you actually have to test your bottles to make sure the bottles don't leach anything into the oil as well, right?
Yep, and that would be more akin to what is happening in this oven right
now,
okay. Where it's finished containers. We might put them in different configurations to check for seal integrity, leaking. Heat will help accelerate any interactions that can occur. So say, for instance, one of these bottles had an improper resin that had been selected and it starts to panel or maybe
leach
disintegrate or leach. You get pools of oil. We would be able to catch that before allowing use of certain materials. On the stability side, to your shelf life question, we would typically be using something in a clear container and taking it through similar paces so that we can visually see anything that could be occurring that would be of concern to the formula.
All right, we are walking over to an entirely new section of the laboratory that I didn't know existed. This is like a labyrinth in here.
Well, since we basically always relate everything back to food, this is basically if you have shaved ice and you have 47 different flavors and they're all different colors and things, that's like the syrups and the coloring.
This is, so Elise is taking bottles out of a box here, and they're all labeled, and holy mackerel, there are so many additives.
Anti-foam, antioxidant, dispersant, anti-wear, synthetic base oil, conventional base oil,
friction modifier, pour point, depressant,
detergents,
conventional base oil, anti-foam. So this is wild, and they're all very different colors, and whoa, he tipped one.
And not all of them are liquid either.
No, hold on, Paul just tipped one over, and the goo inside doesn't even move. This is a viscosity modifier, and it almost looks like a solid, like candle wax, even though I know it's not. This is fascinating because I've not seen this on camera before.
So you're showing a couple bottles there that have base oil and synthetic base oils, and they're clear. So how does oil get its color? Everybody generally is like, it's gold. Okay, there we go.
Conventional base oil is
But some of it's
actually-
clear. So is some of that from the additives, or do you purposely color the oil?
So you're onto a really good point. The level of processing that an oil goes through will generally show, first and foremost in the base oils, as getting more clear, or water white, as sometimes we call it.
We're looking at 3 specifically right here. One looks like honey. The next one looks like a cooking oil, right? Cooking oil, it's kind of a lighter yellow. And then a conventional base oil is almost clear, like you might mistake this for water.
And the viscosity seems like water, too, as you see moving the bottles around.
It just goes to show not only can conventionals have quite a stark difference, but as you get higher and higher refined, they do become more clear, and you'll notice some different properties about them, including sometimes a little higher viscosity or lower viscosity, and particularly at different temperatures.
Okay, so then what you'll do is start with the correct base oil, your front row of these bottles. These are little 6-inch tall bottles here with caps on them. And then you've got all the potential additives behind us, like antioxidants, anti-foam, friction
Anti-wear,
modifiers,
viscosity,
like I said,
foam,
your pour point,
detergent.
depressant.
Look how dark the detergent is.
And that's actually when you look at a oil, you will see a darker color, and that's generally due to the additives. Particularly detergents are often darker, some dispersants can be, as well as other additives. So that's generally for a synthetic oil where you see a lot of the color come from.
So I recently learned something that maybe you guys can speak to because you're scientists and I'm not. And we're talking about viscosity, and we're talking about extreme pressure, which has me looking at this box of gear lube over here. And the gear lube is a 75W90. We might have a 1040 as a motor oil. And somewhere along the way, I was in a forum or a group, and somebody says, why can't I just put motor oil in my differential? And somebody says, the viscosity scales are actually different. And so motor oil viscosity and gear lube viscosity aren't 1-to-1. And so you shouldn't do that. Is that true?
Generally, yes. So motor oils follow a different viscosity range than gear oils. There are some viscosities that would kind of line up. And in fact, in some applications, usually non-automotive, that you can put different oils in different applications. It's really depends on the application, though.
Okay.
But yeah, no, you're right. It is a different viscosity gradient. It's
so it would be like my
Fahrenheit
1040 feels thicker than my 90 weight gear lube or something like that. Like they're not a 1-to-1, and so you don't want to put your motor oil in your diff. That and the additive package and thermal management is all wrong as well.
Absolutely. Yep, you're right.
So then looking at the different bottles, you've got this front row here that you just set up for us on the countertop with the base oils all the way from, like I said, honey all the way to super clear. And then will you put those in a beaker and then you start putting in other viscosity modifiers based on predetermined quantities, and then you'll test them from there? Or just take me through just generally how you'd go about it.
It usually starts out on paper, so we kind of lay out our whole design, the different ingredients, think of it as the recipe.
Yep.
There may be a few iterations of that will come to the lab to be blended, where we work with our scales and beakers, and we're pouring together, mixing together the chemistries. Those then start through the lab process to do some basic quality checks to make sure the viscosity is what we intended it to be, because as you can see, there's a lot of different thickness to the different components. And so
Elise is literally, as she's saying that, she's turning a bottle upside down, and it doesn't even, well, it is moving. Whoa.
Looks like molasses.
It's molasses. It's a dispersant is how this is labeled.
Yep. So you have to balance out the different viscosities. So you kind of start with what you expect in your paper formula. You obviously have to validate that in the lab, get that all into the requirements before you then start doing all of your other testing, because there's a lot of testing that goes on. So you have to kind of take your first couple of baby steps, make sure your formula is built as you intend it to be. You typically then would build a larger blend so that we have more oil to work with, so that as we're running the different tests in the labs, or as we're sending samples down to our mechanical lab, we have one big batch of formulation to work from to help with that validation process.
Can you take us through, just quickly, take us through some of these types of things? For example, I'm holding in my hand viscosity modifier, and this looks like,
but check this out.
Flour,
this is
salty,
also viscosity modifier.
Like, I don't understand.
Like a gel
well, this is a powder
right.
in my hand here, and then like Holman, you had, there's another one that's a gel. How are these three viscosity, they're all labeled viscosity modifiers, okay? We'll put them side by side, and one does look like Vaseline. The middle one looks like a very thick but clear oil, and then this one looks like salt or like sugar or something, like it's at granular. How is that possible that they're so different?
They're different because they are the composition or how they're built is different, and so each one has unique properties, and this really does speak to how you design a product to meet requirements, or how you could misformulate a product and have a product that fails if you don't understand the chemistry properly. And so this was a really good example of showing, when we had a dealer convention, showing our dealers the uniqueness of the components. And so these are all polymers. They are generally larger molecular weight, but you can see that each one kind of carries a different property to it, and so they perform different, whether it be in how it manages viscosity at high temperature, or how it can maybe resist shear in that test that we were talking about previously.
Here's Lightning's favorite ZDDP right here.
Anti-wear.
Zinc dialkyl dithiophosphate.
Now this chemical is famous when it comes to motor oil. Why is that? ZDDP.
It's an excellent additive for a lot of reasons. It is great at providing anti-wear. Basically, when it falls apart or oxidizes, it actually creates a layer and reacts with the surface of iron to create a harder iron surface, so it prevents wear. It also can lay down some phosphorus in a generally kind of a amorphous sort of less durable but still a good cushion for wear. So it's like multiple ways it protects against wear. It also is what they call a multifunctional additive because it does impart some antioxidancy as well, as it does when it gives up. It's when it breaks down, it actually is sacrificing itself for preventing other things from breaking down. So it is.
It's a martyr additive.
It is a martyr additive, yes. But it's a good one. But unfortunately, you do have to balance it because too much is never always a good thing, even for the best of things, right? And so phosphorus, for example, can hurt emission systems, and too much zinc, you can actually impact some other properties of an oil that you wouldn't want to have be present in an oil. So it really is kind of finding that balance for each formulation, and that's kind of, I think, some of the expertise and understanding that we can offer. So,
Elise, Paul, thank you so much for touring us through the AMSOIL laboratory. It's honestly, it's an honor. You guys are amazing. Thank you.
You guys can let all the technicians who disappeared when we entered the lab come back to work now.
Sounds great. No, thank you all for visiting. It was great having you.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate it.
All right, so we had so much great content in this episode from visiting AMSOIL. We're going to break it up into 2 episodes. So we are going to take a break, and the next episode will be the second half of AMSOIL. So for this show, we have to thank all of our sponsors. Presenting sponsor, Nissan. So if you're in the market for a brand new Nissan truck, head over to nissanusa.com, where you can build a price, or head on down to your local dealer.
And we have to thank Banks Power. I don't know, Holman, if you noticed above Mark Nyholm's desk, but he had the brand new Cool Runner oil pan for Duramax pickup trucks and Ram Air Trans Pan. Both are hanging up there because you can also get AMSOIL with those kits. So head over to bankspower.com. If you have a Duramax truck, you need to know about the Cool Runner oil pan and the Ram Air Trans Pan. Head there now.
And I would tell you more about AMSOIL, but you've just listened to this entire episode, so you probably know.
And you're going to get more on the next episode.
So you're going to find about all of this and more from this episode and the next one at truckshowpodcast.com, wherever you download your podcast, or AMSOIL.com.
And when you're looking for phenomenally engineered truck accessories like window visors, LED lights, or our favorite, the EGR Roll Track tonneau cover, you head over to egrusa.com. The Truck Show Podcast is a production of Truck Famous LLC. This podcast was created by Sean Holman and Jay Tillis with production elements by DJ Omar Khan. If you like what you've heard, please open your Apple Podcast or Spotify app and give us a 5-star rating. And if you're a fan, there's no better way to show your support than by patronizing our sponsors. Some vehicles may have been harmed during the making of this podcast.